Hey guys, what is up? Yoshi TCG here. Decided to start up a new YouTube channel, kind of focusing on TCG, mainly Riftbound, as that's what I'm kind of putting most of my time into right now, but maybe some other TCGs along the line as well. Um, but yeah, let's get started. I wanted to just do a quick tier list video for our introduction to set 4. Pretty cool set. Kind of some cool new mechanics in the set. However, I do think the overall power level of the set is not as high as, for example, set 3 was. There are some strong cards, particularly like Lightning Rush probably being the strongest card of the set. That does enable that Cannon deck to do some cool things. But yeah, I do think that the meta hasn't changed too much, and we'll discuss it as we go along this tier list. So yeah, let's just go ahead. I've been testing pretty intensively. I'm going to Barcelona. So this will just I'll be trying to make some like deck guides and like preparations for the regional qualifiers coming up, Barcelona, LA. For each specific deck, I've done a lot of testing on a majority of the legends, the new legends particularly, just to get familiar with them. So I'll expect some more content coming out later, going into more detail on specific decks, card choices, and all that good stuff. So yeah, let's get right into it. Let's start off with Kaisa. I'm gonna, I might move things around as we keep going, but let's start with Kaisa in B tier. She's still a pretty good like removal mid-range deck. Like I said, I might move her up or down depending as we keep going on. Volibear, I think if you play some form of Aurora type deck with Volibear, with something similar to what Billionaire has been running, I do think it's probably B tier. However, I'm gonna slide it slightly down to C tier because there is more gear removal introduced in set 4. So some of the easier matchups um, are now aren't as easy, right? Like Draven has more gear removal. Red got more gear removal. Purple got that 3-drop. So there's more gear removal, which means Aurora decks slightly get worse. So I'm gonna just put it in C for now. Uh, I do think Jinx got a lot of support in this set. I just don't know how good it is, and I haven't tested it too much. But I just don't really think like she might be C tier, but I'm gonna just put her in D tier just for the sake of diversifying the tiers a little here. Darius, I don't hate Darius, and I do think he is not terrible, but I think I'll have him in C for now. I think he's just a little too fair for a deck. He doesn't provide too much card advantage. His biggest play is going wide, like turn 2, or I guess his first turn going second, right? You like drop a 2-drop and a hopeful, but that's not always enough to win you games and whatnot. So we'll keep him in C tier. Ari, I will also put into. Mm, uh, we'll put Ari into D tier. Unfortunately, she's not a terrible deck, but she has very big flaws. She's just a hold most of the time she's just a hold deck, right? And if they break your holds or you can't get on a battlefield, this deck just crumbles really hard. So just like when she's getting her game plan off, it's very toxic and it is good, but it's just not the most consistent thing. So I'm gonna put her in D tier. Lee Sin, unfortunately, is probably D tier as well. Yasuo, probably D tier as well. Leona, also probably D tier. Teemo, I'm gonna put in the C tier. I do think Teemo is interesting. Um, I think it's similar to Ari. He's kind of a whole deck as well. And if he can't really get on the battlefields, he has issues hiding cards and whatnot. But he has other ways to get on the battlefields now. He has the sprite stuff to accelerate. Um, like sneaky deckhand if they want to play that. But I do think Timo is not terrible. I'll put him in the C tier. Victor, pretty good. Similar, he's kind of like a controlling mid-range deck that can play kind of fast. Similar to Kaisa, he has like kill spells instead of damage spells, but um, He can also like abuse Deadly Flourish, which is a really good card. You know, Victor just doing Victor things, can never miss a 2-drop on him because his legend creates one, so he's very consistent in what he does. So I think he's definitely solid B tier. Misfortune, this is another Aurora deck mostly. Um, I just don't know. I will probably put her in C tier as well. She's not much better than Volibear. She does have, sure, I guess I'll put her in the bottom of B tier because she does have like the pack and stuff, so she can have a little more consistency compared to Volibear, right? So she might be getting to her Aurora slightly faster. I do still think there's too much gear hate. I'll put her in the top of C. I might change my mind later. Set overall, I think Set is a good B tier. Um, he's got a unique strategy in what he does. He can abuse Faithful, which is probably the best 2-drop in the game. Um, and he can keep it safe, right? And keep moving it back and forth and whatnot. Uh, his legend is pretty annoying. He can, GA. He just unfortunately has a very tough time against purple and with bounce spells, right? Like Rebuke, Starcross, and then the new one that's like a 3/1. It's pretty much an upgraded Gust. That's that's gonna hurt Set a lot. So I'm not gonna put him any higher than this. He's probably a low end of B tier, but the new 3/1 purple spell is just more copies of bouncing cards, which is pretty much Set's biggest weakness, right? Annie, even though the Set 1 legends have rotated out, I do think Annie is. I want to put her in A, but we'll put her in the top of B for now. It might change later. She's very strong. I think she's one of the best mid-range aggro decks. She just does her job very well. She's good at keeping her units alive with the flash loop. So I think she's like, definitely high B, low A. Yi, I think, is just still S tier. They got this new 2-drop where if it survives combat, it gains 2 more might. So you can just charm something in. So let's say you can just develop that 2-drop, walk them up, charm something in. Now it's a 6 might on defense, right? Like, just crazy value. So they got a better 2-drop. They don't have to play like Pit Rookie now. They can just play that. So I think he has gotten decent support, and it's still just overall a good deck, right? So I think he will still be S tier. I know he's also rotated out, so you probably won't see too much of him, but still a very scary deck. Lux, I'm gonna put Lux in A tier for the combo deck. It's still a big threat. It can still high roll and win a lot of games. If your deck isn't super fast, you are probably gonna lose to this deck. So I think this is, once again, it's rotated out, so you probably won't see it too much, but it is still a very scary deck. Garen, we'll just put in D. Rumble, put in D. Lucian, I think it will still have to be in D. Like, you could argue Lucian's a C tier, but like, he's very similar to Ari, where he can do some cheesy things, but it's not that consistent, right? So if Ari's in D tier, Lucian will stay in D tier as well. Draven, everyone's been hyping Draven up, thinking he's like some S tier type legend. I just don't really see it. He, I've tested Draven a lot after people were saying he's good again. I just don't. I just don't think so. I think Forerunner is specifically a worse card now, just like how I said Set's worse because of the extra 3 copies of bounce spells. The same idea with Forerunner. Now there's even more cards that can bounce Forerunner. So red playing Forerunner is just even less consistent now into purple, and most of the top tier decks will be purple. I know you don't see them here, but as we keep going down this list, a lot of the top tier decks are purple. So like you can't even abuse Forerunner. It feels risky to even play it in the main deck at this point. The new 2-drops that came out are just bait, like Discipline, the one that Mill Burns one or whatever to go to 3. Like, it's really just not that good. I think Inferna is overall just better. Like, yes, Inferna sits at base for 1, but Inferna can also be used as like a reaction type speed combat trick. So I just don't even think Draven got much support besides that new 3-drop gust spell that's like a rebuke now. So I just don't see it. I think Annie's still better than Draven, and any deck that can deny Draven draws will make this deck look very bad, right? Like if Draven doesn't get his legend off, this deck just feels a lot worse, right? So, um, Rek'Sai, I think yellow got a lot of good support. I'm gonna go ahead and put Rek'Sai in A tier. I think this is one of the stronger decks off set 4. Like not a lot of decks got that much support from set 4, but there's been a lot of yellow support. And I haven't cooked Rek'Sai Brew personally, but I think Rek'Sai was already on the climb, and I think this deck will just get better every set. Like they just keep adding good support for this deck and more cards that you can trigger off his legend or her legend, sorry. But it's just gonna be consistently getting better, and just this deck generating inherent value from its legend is very strong. And it's just an aggressive deck. Yes, it lost Arena's greatest, which is a slight hit to it, but every deck also lost aspirants as well. So I just don't really think it's that bad of a hit losing Arenas. Like it can still, I think it'll still shine and it has very good lines now with, there's more good 2 drops that came out for yellow, more yellow support. They added yellow kill spells into the back line. So I think there's a lot of interesting things Rek'Sai will be able to do next set. I'm gonna put him up in A tier. Ornn, I think Ornn's a solid B tier, C tier champ. Sorry. He has a pretty good game plan. He's not too inconsistent. Uh, I just don't really. He's an okay legend. I don't think too much has changed. He did get a new 2 drop gear, which is pretty nice. Well, I just don't think I can put him in the B tier. It just doesn't feel correct. I guess I can put him on the top of C. How about that? I do think the new 2 drop gear is pretty unique and cool for his deck. So, um, I think that plus some other support that this deck got makes it slightly better, but not too much better. I think a top of C is a good spot for Ornn. Jax, I just haven't really played enough, but it's probably just D tier, honestly. Irelia, still a very strong deck. I'm gonna go ahead and keep her in the S tier. I know she kind of fell off later on in the set. At the end of set 3, she didn't really get too many top 8s, but she started off the set strong. She won Sydney, right? The first regional, I think, of set 3. And then she just won the big national event in China that had like 2,000 players. I think it was 2 Aurelias playing in the finals. I think this deck will consistently just be very oppressive. Abandoned Hall, Stellacorn, just this deck can do very unfair things. So, yeah, sometimes you can, you know, choke it out and it can't set up properly or it falls behind, but it's just its highs are very strong and it's not that inconsistent. Like it's pretty consistent at what it does, right? So I think the biggest fall off of why I really fell off was acceptable losses coming into the decks of like Diana, which really, when you accept the losses, the boots of swiftness, it really slows down your point tempo. So I think that's why Aurelia really took a hit. But I think people, if they adapt and figure things out, like this deck is still very strong, right? Azir, I'll put Azir in A tier. I think this legend is very strong. It's very consistent. This might actually be the most consistent deck. Like it's almost impossible to miss a 2 drop. I think they play 10 or maybe 9, but it just does what it does very well, and it's just a lot of math behind it. Um, but it gets to play great cards like Vi. Doing all the death grip stuff is very strong. Can produce a ton of might. So I like Azir. I think he'll remain as A tier. I think he was A tier last set. I think he'll remain A tier this set. Ezreal. This is one of the most broken decks in Riftbound, and people just haven't really caught on. I mean, they have caught on now because I know Bradekin did very well in Hartford with it, but I was crying about Pack needing to get banned as soon as Bewitching dropped in set 3. Yeah, I think Pack of Wonders just needs to go. Um, this deck just abuses it the best, but that card just facilitates a lot of degenerate gameplay. Ezreal is just a very degenerate deck. No one likes playing against this deck. It's just super toxic. And then when it goes up against like a Forerunner or Baron Nashor or something, then it can't even play the game itself, right? So it's just a very polarizing deck where it's either just completely destroying decks or has no answer to a card. It just ban Pack, please. Uh, yeah. Renata, probably D tier still. Silver Aurora, just because it can make the golds. I will put it a little higher. We'll put it like here, I think. Uh, Not too much things were added for Silver Aurora from set 4 that I can think of. So I think it's just slightly worse than it was before. Aurora was already falling off in set 3. So with more hate coming in set 4, I don't really see Silver Aurora doing that well. I think more and more of them are going to start trickling. If they're getting played at regionals, I think they're gonna start losing more rounds because there's gonna be more gear hate accessible. So I'll put it in, kind of the middle of B tier here. Fiora, this deck is just it's not the best. It's not terrible. It's definitely playable. I'll just put it probably top of C. Jin, I'm not gonna put in D just because there are some turbo Jin builds that are not terrible. I'll just put Jin in the middle of C. Rengar, this is a deck I have a lot of experience with. I think I'll put him in the top end of B tier. He's a pretty fair deck. I think the only time Rengar doesn't feel fair is on Emperor Diaz or when he gets the Faithful. He's an orange deck that can abuse Faithful as well. Any deck that can abuse Faithful is automatically B tier or higher. Um, Rengar just also uses Emperor Diaz very well. I think post Emperor Diaz, though, he struggles a lot with card draw and just uh, having a card like he's bad at generating card advantage essentially when he's not on Emperor's Diaz. So it's very easy to pick them apart, or if you misplay slightly games 2 and 3 and you don't, you waste the card that you weren't supposed to waste. It can be hard to come back from, right? Like Annie, I think is slightly better because she can continuously do flash loops to keep her units alive. Like Rengar does have, tricks to keep his units alive too. Thrill or Apothecary, bounce something back, replay it to base, but Annie does a little better. That's why I think Annie's slightly better. Annie also just has access to purple, so she gets to play the good cards, like Starcross, all this. Like if you slam a Forerunner onto Rengar, he is kind of in shambles. Like the best out to the Forerunner is like dropping an orange Rengar on it, but if they have any type of energy up, it can be scary, right? So Forerunner is usually an issue for Rengar, or just anything that you need to like him not having access to purple. Obviously, purple's the best color, right? So that's why I'll put him in this area. I mean, Draven and him are probably interchangeable, but he's somewhere around the top of B tier. Pike. Pike is kind of just like a worse version of Ezreal. Unfortunately, it just doesn't really have Bellows Breath, and a lot of its kill spells are a lot more expensive. So I'm gonna put him in the middle of B tier. I think Ezreal is infinitely better, and the fact Ezreal replenishes its cards because of its legend makes it just overall a better deck. Digs through and finds its components faster, right? Like Ezreal removes your units, but he also then draws like 2, 3 cards, finding his packs, his troves, his spirits. Pike has to play like trash cards like Void Seeker to like try and draw, which it's just night and day. Ezreal's obviously just the better version of the deck. I know the top 8 in that played Pike in Hartford was doing some type of mid-range esque Pike. It was like kind of like a hybrid. However, when I was watching some of his games, he was kind of not using the battle axe card properly. He wasn't like detaching it and dealing 4 damage to his units. He was playing with a bunch of Chinese cards. I'm not gonna say he cheated or anything, but it just seems very suspicious, and I wouldn't be surprised if he, you know, was doing that thing with the battle axe for a lot of his early rounds versus people who had no idea what those cards did, right? So he's generating like what I'm saying, like that's why I'm not gonna say he did anything like that, but it was just suspicious because he did it on stream and he acted like he didn't know, so he even if he didn't know, that means he must have been doing it all the rounds prior, right? So that kind of takes away a little bit of how well he did in that event, and I can't really judge that build. I do think Pike still is probably middle B tier. Vi, unfortunately, is probably D. Lilia, she's not terrible. She still just has a huge problem with Vex, apathetic. Honestly, I'm gonna put her in the top of C tier. XPE, I just don't have enough experience with it. Get it? XPE experience. All right. Probably D tier. Vex, not a terrible deck. It's just very similar to. It's a very polarizing deck as well. It kind of just has to go first to perform. Like most hold decks, if it doesn't get the hold, if you break the hold or you stop it from getting onto a battlefield, the deck just crumbles immediately. However, it is probably the best hold deck, generates the most value off holding. I think B is a good tier for Vex. Ivern, another hold deck, and okay, this might be too high, but I'm gonna put Ivern to B. I think Ivern got a lot of support. He honestly might not be that bad anymore. Still, it's the nature of hold decks. He's still just a hold deck, but I do think I will put him into. Nah, I'm coping. I'm coping. We'll put him in top of C. I do think he got a lot better though. So if you were an Ivern fan or an Ivern enjoyer, I do think there's a lot more brew for set 4. He's one of the decks that actually did get support. Um, so definitely check out Ivern. Still some potential there, if you want to go for a best of or whatnot. Diana, just one of the best decks still for sure. This deck also just I think acceptable losses will just be insane next set, right? Like I think people are just gonna be playing seals or there's a lot of new gear support. So I think acceptable losses, they're already maining like 2, so I think it's gonna just generate infinite value now if you slow down Kennen and pop their seals or, you know, whatever gears people are playing, it's very strong. Obviously, like Irelia, you can pop the swiftness. Sonya's it's good against Azir. There's some gear in Lux, Ezreal, right? So I think Diana and the fact that she has access to losses being a 1 cost, very cheap, replayable, loopable with Fizz. And then just the deck overall just has a great game plan and good combat spells, cheap spells, generates a lot of card advantage. This is, everything you could ask for in a deck. It just has very strong deck. Hard to pilot, believe it or not. I do think this deck is actually super hard to pilot, and it's very easy to tell when someone isn't good on Diana because they one or two misplays on this deck, and it just feels like it's unrecoverable, right? It doesn't play as many units, so if you lose your units early, it can feel tough. But still one of the best decks of the format for sure. Post set 4. LeBlanc, this deck is stupid. This deck is very strong, honestly. I'm gonna go ahead and put her in A tier. Unfortunately, she still kind of has issues with purple and gust and Starcross and all that, but there is slight counterplay. I know more people are teching in stuff like Death Grip, more reaction kill things, so they don't lose to stuff like Starcross as much. It's just unfortunate because I do think most of the meta will be purple. Um, and this is just a very hard deck to bring to a regional qualifier. You're going to queue up into purple, get unlucky, and then just take a lot of losses that are out of your control. LeBlanc is a very broken deck when it gets to play how it wants to play, but if it can't conquer and duplicate its units, this deck just feels terrible, right? So it's a very high roll deck. It doesn't really have room to outplay because it kind of just plays the cards it has to play. That's why some people are teching in the Death Grip now and back in again. Gives a little more room for reactions and outplay potential with, leaving runes up. I think this deck did get a lot of support as well. I wouldn't be surprised if people drop Hook and, focus on different versions. There's like a new 3-drop that can just kill a unit and empower her. So you have ways to just kill units directly. However, Hook is still pretty strong in this deck. Just it generates free value, right? You just kill off your token. So I'm curious. I haven't been cooking LeBlanc. I haven't been playing this deck myself, but this deck is very oppressive. Any deck that's not purple, this deck just kind of blows out of the water. So it's definitely top of A tier. Kha'Zix, another very interesting deck. I'm gonna put him top of B tier. I think these four decks right here are kind of all, very interchangeable. They all kind of have a solid game plan. They have good niche game plans and they do it well, right? Kha'Zix also can abuse Feyhulk. Like I said, if you can abuse the Feyhulk, you are immediately a B tier deck. He's got a decent sig spell. He can remove a lot of, he has Faithful plus the sig spell, right? So he has a lot of ways to just destroy all your development. And he has access to purple cards as well. So very good deck. Also kind of hard to play. Knowing how to manage your stuff with this deck is pretty important. Um, Not too much support for this deck came out, but it's still top of B tier in my opinion. Poppy, I'll just put. I do think Poppy's not terrible, but she's just doing cheesy stuff with like auroras and like harness, just very cheesy stuff. I'll put her in the top of C. Akali, all right. Is this the first set four champion? This might be the first set four champion. All right, everyone wants to know where I'm gonna put Akali. I will put Akali right. Let me think. I've been testing Akali a lot myself. I'm gonna put Akali right here, middle of B tier, middle to high B tier. Um, I think she's a very cool deck. I think she's actually very unique to play and very hard to play. Trying to make decisions on when to go in and score versus when to use your legends um, can be very challenging and lead to quick misplays, right? So I do think that this legend is difficult to play for sure. So I think maybe later on we might see her creep up a tiny bit once lists are more solved. I think the main issue with this deck is it just needs more support. Like it needs a good ambush unit that it can leave on a battlefield. That's essentially like, in my opinion, what this deck kind of needs. It needs like an ambush unit that's can hold essentially. Like you're not gonna like. I know some people are dropping Infernos or Red Ringars and then backing out there. Like it's just not. I I tried all that. It's just very bad. I think I've I think I've pretty much solved the Akali list. I have a very good Akali list, and it does what it does very well with the cards that we are given out of these four sets. And I do think it's just a solid high B tier deck. When it gets rolling, it's very oppressive, but sometimes it's hard to get rolling. People remove your Stellacorn, or they just pressure you with points, and then you just can't really make use of your legends. You have to fight back. The deck also has a big issue holding. Um, but overall, pretty strong deck, and I think it'll just get better over time as well. Great best of in my opinion, to go for. If you put a lot of time into this deck, you will outperform other Akalis, So I think this is a deck that requires time investment. So if you are willing to put in the time, you will perform well with this deck. And she is a relatively newer deck, so people won't know exact lines you're going for. So I think there's a lot of merit in actually mastering Akali right now. And it's honestly just a waifu type, champion. So I think her best of is a great EV if you're going to an event. Renekton. Poor Renekton, man. I am a big Renekton player in League. Love this champ. Unfortunately, they gave him the the poor end of the stick. He is very mediocre. I'm gonna put him probably. It's sad. I don't want to put him down here, but he's pretty much the bottom of C tier. Uh, I hope someone proves me wrong, man, but this deck is it's just trying to put you on less than 4 runes every turn, and that means you just can't even that means you're playing like 2 cards a turn. So like it's just so linear and easy to play around, and they're mostly tapping out to do his game plan. So it's just like this deck is very bad. His chosen champs are bad. His sig spell is whatever. It's too expensive. You're tapping 4, and then if it gets defied, you're feeling sick. So sadly, Renekton's gonna be bottom of C tier. Next up, we have Zed. Also, unfortunately, a bit disappointing. Um, I will say these Miracle Zed builds are beyond fake. None of these Miracle Zed builds are real. He does not have enough consistency to be able to play that type of deck. I do think Zed is very close in game style to kind of Annie and Draven. He's just a mid range red purple deck, right? But his niche is kind of burning cards and playing around his chosen champion, the purple Zed. I think you can do some really cool tricks with him. It's unfortunately just not too amazing. I'll put him in the bottom of B tier. Personally, I think that's a good spot for him. He can play stuff like Rasa just as his high end because he burns so much. You know, you don't mind just developing a Rasa for like 2 1 power, like 3 energy 1 power, 2 energy 1 power. It just still feels good. He also kind of struggles with holding, so if you just slam a bunch of Rasas after you burned onto a battlefield, it's kind of just free and you still keep up runes if it's late game. So he's not bad. He just has a very bad matchup into Irelia and Diana, two of the better decks in the format. He can't put up as much might all the time. There are cool tricks you can do, like I said, with Ride the Wind and Flash with the Shadow Clones. You can get the clones up to like 15 something might, but it's just not always an option, and he kind of struggles with like removal on the champion unit, like if they falling start or singularity or champion unit, and you can't develop like clones. It feels bad. He's also just bad into blue. If they Bellows Breath your backline after you develop a bunch of shadow clones. It also feels bad. But once again, I do think this is a good best of to go for. Zed is a popular champ. I do think he has very cool lines that are hard to see if you don't put in the time. So I think he's a champ you can put in the time with and still make day two with pretty easily. I think he's a very definitely a day two legend. So if you can outperform other players on day two and are confident with this deck, he's a good best of to go for, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, Nasus, the big dog Nasus. A lot of people are. I've heard a lot of mixed things about Nasus. Some people are hyping him up crazy. Some people are calling him unplayable tier. I have tested Nasus a lot. I will say that he's a very linear deck, which when a deck is linear, it's in my opinion, it's not a good thing because people know exactly what you're gonna do, right? Like you're going to 7 runes, they know you're just gonna watch your bellows them. Like sure, when around Barcelona, people aren't gonna know this, and you're gonna completely blow people out of the water with Watcher's Bellow on 7. It's a curve people don't expect. It's gonna blow people out. They're gonna develop into you and then just get hard punished. So I think for Barcelona, Nasus will probably be like middle B tier here. But I think once the format is solved, he's gonna trickle his way down to probably the top of C. Uh, we'll put him in the bottom of B. Bottom of B is a good spot for Nasus. Like I said, he's got some cheesy game plans. His best play for sure is Watcher Bellow on 7. So you just need to be wary of that. Um, he's honestly not that bad of a deck though. I think a lot of people are undervaluing some of his. I think they're just kind of undervaluing him. Pretty strong, untapped 2. It's pretty much Annie with like a higher cost though. You have to obviously play a 7 drop, but he has plenty of ways to develop a 7 drop without, slowing him down or whatnot, right? He has a lot of good 7 drop developments and whatnot. So yeah, bottom of B tier for Nasus. I do think he's probably up like here for Barcelona, but then I think once the set is more figured out, he'll make his way down to the bottom of B. Shen, Shen. I'm just not going to waste any time. Shen is D tier, man. Just one of the worst hold decks. Like Ivern does it better. Vex obviously does it better. Unfortunate. I do play Shen in League, and I think they just completely missed the mark on Shen. So it was honestly, I was honestly pretty upset with how Shen turned out to be here, but it is what it is. All right, Jace. I do think Jace is the new Aurora deck. It has some weird gimmicks to it. I do think it'll be slightly better than Sivir. Not by much, but it will be slightly better than Sivir. I'll put it like here, I guess. Um, it's very explosive. There are some crazy combos with this deck. I don't know if I want to leak them yet, but oh man, this deck can do some explosive things. And I'm talking about the Aurora build, obviously. Like I don't think there's a real build with gears and stuff yet. I don't know if there's enough support for that, but for Aurora, it can feel a little clunky. And promising future, if you whiff it, you do deramp yourself. So like I don't think those are like the best things, but like this deck can play Dredge Up, which is it was an insane card. Dredge Up is just an insane card. I wouldn't be surprised if it just becomes like a staple in blue decks, but uh obviously it has Clairvoyance, Digs 5, Promising Future, Digs 5. It can play stuff like Temporal Breach or whatever that new card is. It can blink the Elder on a battlefield, which is very good. You can dodge Starcross with that. I just do think it's an Aurora deck, so it does have the same issues, and it's probably a little. I know it sounds weird, but it's probably a little less consistent than Sivir. But for the fact that it can play Temporal Breach, Bellows Breath, hitting the backline is very strong. I do think it's the power level of this deck is slightly higher than Sivir. Um, I do think Sivir does do it a little better game 2 and 3 because when people play the gear hate, like you can still just play, uh, mind splitters and whatnot. Like I don't really know what the game plan for Jace is besides just digging a bunch more to find another Aurora. But I think this deck will probably be here for now just because of how explosive it is, but later on it'll probably be here and be a little worse than the Sivir. Next up we have Mel. Mel, in my opinion, is just a worse version of Ezreal and Diana. Obviously, she does have a very broken signature spell. And versus certain matchups, you can't really avoid it. Like, you can't avoid playing a spell, right? Like, you play against Mel, and the first thing in your mind should be like, I can't activate spells now unless she's tapped out. Like, not a lot of people are gonna think like that. So I do think Mel in the beginning of the split or beginning of this, the first few regional qualifiers, I do think she will be kind of like top of B because no one's gonna really play around rebuttal, or they might know about the card existing, but when they're playing the game and doing sequencing, they'll forget about it. So until people are more familiar with Mel, I will put her kind of like up here, probably like here. But I do think, unfortunately, she's probably like bottom of B. Um, Once people stop playing spells into you, you just don't even have a signature spell anymore. And then she just doesn't really have a legend. Like her legend ability is fake. You can play her like Ezreal with packs and stuff, but Ezreal just does it better. Pike arguably does it better too. And then if you play her like Diana, more like a mid range with like Bloom, like student, like Raven Bloom students, more might manipulation things. Diana just generates more card advantage, so it's just better as well, right? So she's a good best of Metal Chase, I think. Because she's not bad. Like she's got really good colors and a good sig spell. So like she's definitely like in B tier. And I think on the higher end, like I said, for the first few regional qualifiers, but as it's more solved, I think she'll meet up close with Nasus. All right, next up, Mbessa. A lot of people are hyping up Mbessa. Um, I don't think she's that strong, to be honest. This is one of the decks I've been testing a lot, and I have found some cool lines. And she does play pretty. She does have some very cool lines, but there are some issues with this deck for sure. Um, that being said, though, she is still fairly strong. I'm gonna put her here, right in the middle of B tier. Um, wouldn't be surprised. She's definitely a day 2 legend. She has good game plan. Uh, she can ready her units, never a bad thing. She can play a lot of kill spells. Rampage is her sig spell, so she can destroy a lot of your development. She can play a Lacerate or Lacerate, whatever it's called. She can hit your backline. Um, She has good might pump like Glitter Roar or whatever. If they're empowered, is a +4 for 2 energy. So she has good combat tricks. Very poor card draw is the main issue with these colors. It's I did try things with like the 2-drop when it gets mighty draws 2. I tried doing some things with that, but it just wasn't consistent enough. So I ended up cutting it. The build I play now is pretty strong. I do think Kale and that new battlefield where you empower for 1 less. It's a very strong combo for this deck. Its game one is really, really impressive because of that. Unfortunately, just this deck also, just like Set, struggles in the purple. And like I mentioned, they added more bounce spells in purple, right? So like at least when you have a triple empowered Kale, they have to pay deflect 3, right? So they're going down 4 runes. You can also play like Repulse, but Repulse is a very awkward card. It's just dead in your hand most of the time, so like you don't want to play too many of that card. But you could like main one, side one. That's kind of where I'm at with my ratios on Repulse. I had it at a higher count, but I realized the deck doesn't really have any way to filter through its hand. So when you draw multiple of like Repulse or something that's bad in a certain matchup, it feels really bad. So I cut it to 1 in the side instead. I'll probably make videos on like Akali and Mbessa. Those are the 2 legends I've played a lot. And I also have, well, actually, I've played a lot of Akali, Mbessa, Zed. I've played a lot. I played Nasus as well a lot. I didn't play that much Mel. I haven't played that much Mel or Renekton. But besides that, I'll probably show something for like Akali and Bessa, Zed, and then Kennen as well. I've been playing a lot of Kennen. I've thoroughly tested all the Kennen builds. Hook, Miracle Purple, just like a more mid-rangey control. Um, this deck is definitely still unsolved, I think. And I think once it is solved, it can get scarier. So I will put it at the top of A for now. I think this is the best legend for the set. Its Sig spell is just very, very strong. Uh, it's just another stack deck, right? But the fact that you can reuse it after the next turn, once you get Seal set up for free, you don't even have to DRAM for it, is very strong. This deck flies through its whole deck, right? So when you're building Kennen, you can build it in a way where you know you're going to see your whole deck, which makes it immediately an A tier or higher deck, in my opinion, because of its consistency. Um, I do think I'm leaning more towards like a purple miracle. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I found a very interesting list, and it's been playing pretty well for me. Um, we'll see if I release it before Barcelona or not, but it's a very strong deck. No matter what, I think all the versions of it are annoying to deal with. Some of them are a little too slow, in my opinion. You can't play decks that slow sometimes, but like I know people are trying to play it like Ezreal, right? Where they're trying to do like the Bewitching and then they like Ruination your board. Like I think that version is very slow. And once people know your game plan is always Ruination, they're just not gonna develop as much units for you to blow them out with, right? So I think it's very easy to play around that version. That version will definitely not be the best version. I still don't know if Hook is that good. Like I was a big believer of Hook, but it just doesn't really seem that great. I think the most consistent will be, the purple miracles with the Rasas. And I was a fan of yellow Kennen, but I just think purple Kennen is very oppressive. Purple Kennen Ride the Wind is just a crazy combo. You're just replaying all of your stack decks and lightning rushes from your trash. You literally go through your whole deck and you keep purple Kennen safe. And then you do the same play next turn because you play the Ride the Wind from the trash, and then you do it again next turn. Like I think purple Kennen provides so much value for the deck. And this deck's legend, just generating a 2 assault, comes up a lot. Not a lot of your guys are big early on, so you just drop like a Kennen at 4, bring them up to a 6. That's almost enough to crack usually any early game hold. So yeah, that is it. I know I rambled a lot, guys. This is my opinion on set 4 Riftbound. Um, the meta for set 4 Riftbound. So yeah, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and yeah, expect more content shortly. But yeah, thank you guys. Bye.